Hello folks, the last video here on our muscles, and now we're going to focus on muscles of the lower leg. So these are muscles that act on the foot and the digits. So the the joint between the tibia and that first tarsal, right, is, remember, that's basically a hinge joint, right? So primarily what we're going to be getting at this ankle is flexion and extension. Now, in this case, flexion is also called uh, dorsiflexion, right? Where you're pulling the foot up, you're pulling the toes of the foot up toward the knee. And extension is called plantar flexion. So it's a little bit weird, but extension and plantar flexion are the same thing. That's where you're extending the toes out and pointing them down towards the floor away from the knee. So those are the two primary actions. But remember, we also have a little kind of a saddle joint here between the calcaneus, between the calcaneus and that talus, right? So you also have the opportunity for inversion and eversion of the foot. So while all the muscles we're going to talk about are basically flexors and extensors of the foot, they'll also, depending on whether they're on the medial side, be inverters, or if they're on the lateral side, everters of the foot. Okay, so let's start here on the back. Sorry, I'll spin it, right? So we're on the back. We're going to start with our major flexors of the foot and of the toes. And the most superficial one is the gastrocnemius. It consists of these two heads. There's the medial and the lateral gastrocnemius. Their origin is up on the the condyles of the femur, right? And this is, we would say it's just above the condyles, so sort of like superior aspect of the condyles of the femur. So we've got these two heads, and you can kind of see them wrapping around the top here on either side, right? Okay, and then they are inserting on a tendon that inserts on the calcaneus. So this calcaneofibular ligament, not quite what I'm looking for, but basically there's this tendon here that inserts on the calcaneus, the heel bone right here, right? So that's our insertion point for that flexor. Let's take it off and see the muscle underneath it. And remember, in our lecture slides, we saw that gastrocnemius is a pretty fast twitch. The whole muscle itself is fairly fast twitch, and the muscle underneath it, the soleus, is relatively slow twitch. So you can see this is quite a broad muscle here, the soleus. It's also so it's originating on the fibula and the tibia, and inserting on the calcaneal tendon as well. So it's inserting on the same tendon that gastrocnemius inserts on it, and inserts finally on the calcaneus, right? So that's a major flexor. Okay, maybe we don't have to take that off. In order to see the next, oh, maybe we do. To see the next flexor, and that flexor is called the fibularis longus, or maybe called the peroneus longus too. You'll see that. So there it is, right? You can see this is a lateral muscle. It's got its origins on the fibula, right? Fairly broad origin on this proximal part of the fibula, but maybe all the way to a third of the way down. And then via this long tendon, it actually wraps underneath, and this is lateral, right? And inserts, maybe we can see, on this metatarsal that's in the medial portion. So it inserts both on a metatarsal and a tarsal that are medial, right? Now, given that, in addition to being a flexor of the, an extender the foot. So all these that we've talked about are doing extension or plantar flexion, right? So all those, the gastrocnemius, the soleus, doing extension or plantar flexion. This one also, because of this lateral origin and medial insertion, is doing some eversion of the foot, right? Okay, and then finally, the flexor digitorum. So we may have to go, let's get rid of this. And this is one that just flexes the big toe, the flexor hallucis, and there's our flexor digitorum longus, right? So this is sort of medial, so you can see its origin is more, it's on the tibia and about a third of the way down the tibia, and for about halfway down the tibia, on the medial side of the tibia, we have this flexor digitorum longus that also is wrapping underneath and around, and you can see then inserting, can we get up there? There we go. Underneath the foot and inserting on the digits, distally on the digits, as well as being bound by a broad aponeurosis to the base of these distal metatarsals, right? So the metatarsals are here. This is distal, this is proximal, where they contact the tarsals. And then here's our phalanges, right? So it's connecting, inserting on those two places. And so this is going to be another plantar flexion, right? Or extension plus flexion of the digits. Okay. And because of this medial origin and lateral insertion, it's going to be a bit of an inverter of the foot, right? If you pull on this, it's going to pull the foot a little bit inward. Okay. Let's wrap around to the front here. Okay, and we'll see this big one here, the tibialis anterior, right, with its origin on fibula and tibia, and then wrapping from lateral to medial around to insert on the base of this metatarsal, the metatarsal of the big toe, right? So that one is going to be a major flexor. So this is responsible for dorsiflexion, right? It's for pulling the toes up toward the knee, right? So that's a major flexor, a dorsiflexor. And because of this wrap from lateral to medial, it's also going to be a bit of an inverter, right? It's going to pull the foot inward. And let's see. Let's do the other side. I'll maybe get rid of this. And here we go. Extensor digitorum longus. This is our other extensor of the toes. So remember, flexion of the toes, they're going to be wrapping under, extension, they're going to be pulling up. So this is not just going to be an extensor of the toes, it's also going to be a little bit of a dorsiflexor of the foot, right? So it's also going to be producing some flexion of the foot, right? So here's our extensor digitorum longus. You can see its origin up here on the tibia and this lateral portion of the tibia, and then extending down to insert on all of the digits with the exception of the big toe, right? Inserting on all of these phalanges, right? And so this is going to, as I said, this is going to be a major extender of the toe, pulling them up towards the knee, as well as pulling the entire foot up. So a dorsiflector, responsible for dorsiflexion of the foot. Okay, let's take a look at these and get body smart, just so we can see the origin and insertion a little bit more clearly, at least on some of these. Here is our gastrocnemius, so our major plantar flexor or extender, right? You can see here the origins. Here's the condyles of the femur. There's the origins of both the lateral and medial heads on the superior aspect of that condyle. Right. So yeah, medial condyle femur area just above condyle, call that superior condyle, right? That's fine. And then posterior, the insertion is on the calcaneal tendon, right? That inserts on the calcaneus here, the heel bone, right? So there's there's our origins and insertion points. They don't have our blue and red here, which is too bad, but this one does. This is our soleus. Underneath it, you can see the origins both on the posterior head of the fibula and neck of the fibula, and the posterior tibia, um, and inserting on the calcaneal tendon and onto the calcaneus. So another important plantar flexor or extender. Let's see it. There it is. Extender of the foot, right? Then our fibularis longus. This one doesn't show anything special for us. You can see it's visible from the outside, and you can see when we pull everything away, its origin here on the tibia. It's wrapping around underneath, right? And then, of course, medial. So here we have our excuse me, this is lateral, so we're looking at the fibula right here, the head of the fibula. So the origin here is on the lateral side of the fibula, so maybe half to 2/3 of the lateral side of that fibula. The insertion after it crosses medially is on the is on a tarsal and the first metatarsal, right? And that's why not only is it an important extender or plantar flexor, but it's also, right, it's also an important everter of the foot, pulling the foot out, right? Let's see. Now we've got our one more flexor, then our extenders, right? So here's our flexor digitorum longus. Okay, this is actually doing both, right? It's flexing the toes and extending the foot, or plantar flexing the foot. So there's our origin here on the tibia, right? Kind of the middle of the shaft of the tibia, and then its insertion on those distal phalanges, right? Sorry. So here we have the middle posterior surface of the tibia, right? And then the base of these phalanges, though it is wrapped by a tendinous sheath to the metatarsals as well. And there's our flexion of the phalanges, right? You can see the flexion, but also an important extender or plantar flexor of the foot because it's wrapped by tendon along the base of these metatarsals. Now we get to our true dorsiflexors, right, or flexors of the foot. These are on the anterior side, and the first one is our tibialis anterior, right? So this is another one that we pull. We can see pretty easy superficially when we pull everything away. We can see sort of tibia and in tibial origin, then wrapping medially and inserting on metatarsals and and tarsals. So here we get the lateral condyle and superior 2/3 of the anterior lateral surface of the tibia. I mean, let's just, you want to shorten this so you can remember it easily. So lateral condyle, anterior anterior proximal tibia, that's fine. And then we'll just not worry about number 2 here. And then you can just say the medial and plantar surfaces of a tarsal, or the base of the first metatarsal, the medial and plantar base of the first metatarsal, right? And you can see that when you, oh, can we? Yeah, sort of. So there's our origin wrapping around medially and inserting on the base of this tarsal and the base of this metatarsal, right? Or the plantar portions of the metatarsal and tarsal. So again, this is going to be an important dorsiflexor or flexor of the foot, as well as an inverter, right? So here's our dorsiflexion, and then here's our inversion of the foot, right? Okay. And lastly, our extensor digitorum longus, a little bit deeper of a muscle. There we go. So there's our extensor digitorum. When we take everything else off, sort of on the originating on the head of the fibula primarily, and then inserting on the anterior of these metatarsals. Of these phalanges. So the lateral condyle of the tibia and the primary insertion is really this anterior surface of the fibula, but there's also a bit on this lateral condyle of the tibia, and then the insertion on these phalanges of digits 2 through 5. So here's our origin, right? There, a little bit here on the tibia, and mostly on the fibula, and then insertion at actually the base of that distal phalange. Right? So again, this is going to be an important, because of its position, it's going to be an important dorsiflexor and also, or flexor of the foot, and also an important extensor of the toes, right? So it extends those toes, there they go, and dorsiflexes the foot. There that goes, dorsiflexion. Okay, please let me know if you have any questions about this. And this is our last video for the muscles. So um, uh, please let me know if you want any clarification on any of the muscles thus far.